Over the last 2,000 years of history, there have been millions of writings, homilies, and commentaries about the foundational teachings of the Catholic Church. But have you ever been interested in the lesser-known aspects of the Church? Those topics that are important, but don't always get center stage? In this podcast, I digress into some of the less talked about intricacies of the Church's rich tradition. Come explore the faith and pique your interest in something you've never thought about before. Join me as we dive into Holy Digressions. Hello everyone, my name is Michael Becker. Welcome to the Holy Digressions YouTube channel and podcast. Today we are going to start our series on the Eastern Catholic Church. I hope to have many conversations about the Eastern Catholic Church because it's such a fascinating topic, especially for us Westerners, and we'll talk about what that means here in a moment. But I am joined with my friend and co-worker, EJ Cerdeiras, who happens to be Eastern Catholic, which is absolutely fantastic. So we're going to pick his brain today and see what he has to say. So EJ, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to talk about the Eastern Catholic churches. I think it's such a great topic to talk about and get into, especially because it's not very well known.
And it's very easy for you to get here to PowerPod Studios since it is literally
I work
40 feet from your office or so.
I should count the steps one day.
We should, so we know
how long it takes me to get here.
How far it is. Yeah. Probably 30 seconds or less.
It takes me less than you.
That is true. I have probably another 15 more steps away from PowerPod Studios than you are.
So I've saved more energy than you.
You've used less energy.
But it can be
same
thing.
Same thing both ways. Yeah. All right. So let's dive into this conversation. So, EJ, you have not always been Eastern. You actually had a fairly recent transition from the Western Catholic Church to the Eastern Catholic Church.
Very complicated transition.
And I guess before we get into that complicated transition, let's go back and talk about what we're actually talking about. What is the whole distinction between the Eastern Church and the Western Church, and why are we using this distinction, and what does that distinction actually mean?
Yeah, so as many of us know, everyone knows the Western Church. Everyone knows the Roman Catholic Church. That is the biggest of the Catholic churches. But that's not the only church in the Catholic Church. It's getting a little confusing with all these church terms.
I like it.
I like it. Yeah. So in the beginning, going over a little bit of church history, when Christ instituted the church, the apostle went out to the world and spread the gospel. And spreading the gospel to the world means spreading it to different locations, but also different people. All right. So eventually the church grew so much that there was an Eastern and a Western side of the church. And because of different cultures and different traditions, those churches developed very differently. And just to summarize the history a little bit, that separation of East and West started growing separately, but also the communication was getting very distorted because back then you couldn't travel very far.
No emails, no telephones, no cell phones.
No texting.
You had probably carrier pigeons and message carriers. Or probably even no carrier pigeons.
No, I think you just rode a donkey everywhere or walked, such as Paul. But eventually communications were getting very poor at the time, and different interpretations about how to live out the Catholic faith started coming about, which caused a lot of tension in the church. And eventually the church split. There was I'm going to call it a minor schism 1054, which was the beginning of the split.
All right, so define schism real quick.
Schism is a separation in the church from the one Holy Catholic Apostolic Church.
It's a split from within.
Correct. Yeah. So it's breaking off from the church. I mean, that's just putting it simply. That a schism is breaking off from the church. Now, both churches went into schism with each other. So both of them thought they were breaking off from each other to the one true church.
Yes.
All right. which is slightly different than what you get later on in the Protestant Reformation,
Mm-hmm.
which is just saying, oh, your teachings have been wrong forever, and we're going to change them now. This one is, no, our teachings are the same because we both came from Christ. We both have apostolic succession. One of us is wrong. We're going to go 2 different ways.
Yeah, I mean, Luther was very clearly, I am leaving the Catholic Church.
Correct.
The schism
Yeah.
was very much, we both think we have the proper interpretation.
Right.
Of
We
the
both
words
have
of
the
Jesus Christ.
we have the Catholic Church. No, we have the Catholic Church. Therefore, they separated.
Yes.
But anyway, moving on in the history. Some of those churches in the East that separated from the Western Catholic Church decided that union was very important, and decided to come back into union with Rome. There was different reasons why people came back. Some political reasons, some just really desiring to have that unity. And those churches are the Eastern Catholic churches. Now, they look very Orthodox.
Yeah,
right?
because the churches that went into schism that are still in schism are
Right.
called Orthodox.
Right, they're called the Eastern Orthodox churches. You're probably most familiar with the Greek Orthodox Church, but there's also the Russian Orthodox Church, the Antiochian Orthodox Church, many different variations of the Orthodox Church, but different groups in those Orthodox churches decided to come back in union with Rome. Now, Rome made the decision that they should keep their traditions. All right, so it's not that they came into Rome and everyone has to be Roman Catholic and do the Latin Mass or the Norse Ordo Mass. Rome has made it pretty clear that these churches should keep their traditions and look as Orthodox as possible.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of differences when it comes to that, but that's essentially how the Eastern Catholic churches came about.
And how many Eastern churches are there? Because we keep using this as plural.
Yes.
So how many are there?
There are 23.
23 different Eastern Catholic churches.
Correct.
That are all still Catholic, which meaning they're in union with Rome underneath
Right.
the Pope. The Pope is still the vicar of all the churches.
Yeah, hierarchy in the East is slightly different than the West. In the West, we're very used to the idea of, priest, bishop, archbishop, if you want to go that far, cardinal, pope, right? In the East, it's you have, well, obviously there's still deacons in the West too, but deacon, priest, bishop, metropolitan, patriarch, pope. So the Eastern hierarchy is slightly different than the West, and we can talk about that maybe at a different time, or you want me to go into it now?
No, that's totally fine. But ultimately, they still hold the Pope as the Holy
Yes,
Father.
that's correct. The Pope is the highest ranking hierarch in the Catholic Church. He has primacy over all of the Catholic churches. So he has the authority that if something's going wrong in the Eastern Catholic churches, like they started doing some type of heresy or something, he has the authority to intervene and discipline that.
Which the Pope being the head of the Eastern Catholic churches is really the primary difference between the Eastern churches and the Orthodox Church.
Correct.
Is that the Orthodox Church does not recognize the Pope as the successor of Peter.
For the Orthodox, he would just be seen as a blessed among equals. He wouldn't have a primacy authority to intervene. That would only belong to the patriarchs.
But it is interesting when you have multiple patriarchs who are all kind of claiming this head position with their individual location.
Correct.
Then what if two patriarchs get into a debate or a fight? There's not kind of the final say.
Schism.
More schism.
Yeah. So that's they don't have a central authority, which is up for debate for the Orthodox Church. Some of them do see a need for it, and some of them are saying no, it should remain how they've interpreted it from earlier on. But there's a lot of debate, and I have my reasons why I'm Catholic.
That is good.
Yes. So, but we can talk about, Orthodox and Catholic relationships and what's the difference there later on, and what's the difference between an Eastern Catholic and an Orthodox at some point.
So, well, first, you said there's 23 different Eastern Catholic churches. Which Eastern Catholic church are you part of?
I am part of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church.
Okay. Why do you say Ukrainian Greek?
Well,
Is it the Ukrainian church or the Greek church, or
right? So
we hyphenating this?
the origins of this church is in Ukraine.
Yep.
And they follow. They've developed a tradition that stems from the Kievan tradition.
Okay.
So you'll hear a lot. The tones that are created in the Eastern Church are very Ukrainian. The traditions that come into the church from their culture are Ukrainian.
Mm-hmm.
Greek is because we follow the Byzantine tradition. So there's different rites. So now we're getting a little
Let's
more
do it.
complicated.
Let's dive.
So there's 23 different churches, but there's 5 different rites.
Within the 23 different churches, or
Yes.
just within the Greek church?
No, just within the 23 different churches.
There's 5 rites.
Correct.
Okay. So how would you define the difference between a rite and a church?
A church is a governing body.
Mm-hmm.
So use a term, we use autocephalous.
Okay.
Which means we're a self-governing church
Mm-hmm.
with a patriarch, a bishop, and a metropolitan and a priest, all that. So we have a self-governing church that's under the Pope, and that is what makes it church. Is that it's a united community of people worshiping God in a certain way. The rite is the way in which we worship.
The bells and whistles.
Right. It's the calendars, the rituals, the traditions that come along with it. So, just an example of the different rites. I'll just go with the tones. In the Eastern Church, we chant the whole liturgy.
Mm-hmm.
But in different rites, the way that sounds is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the Greek church or even the Ukrainian church would sound different than the Russian church or the Chaldean church.
Mm-hmm.
So
is Greek the church and Ukrainian is the rite, or did I have that backwards?
Sorry, no. Byzantine is the rite.
Byzantine is the rite,
which is Greek.
Okay.
All right, which is where you get the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church because we follow the Byzantine tradition. And then so it's the Ukrainian Church, Byzantine rite.
Gotcha. So there's 5 different rites, and the 23 churches can be split up into those different rites depending on which way they're worshiping.
Right. Depends on which way they're worshiping. You also get in Pentecost, the Greeks love to have green everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then another example is for Palm Sunday. In Russia, they have pussy willows because palm branches don't really come by very often.
Mm-hmm.
So that tradition comes up, and it's just a different rite. But also the way the liturgy is done can change in some rites.
Mm-hmm.
So like all the Byzantine churches follow the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom.
Mm-hmm.
But the Armenian rite or the Maronite rite follow a different liturgical tradition. So it's just different traditions, different liturgies that come about.
So now, how many churches are under the Byzantine rite?
Couldn't tell you, but it
Ballpark
is
it.
the biggest.
Because
one.
out of the 23,
I would say about 10.
Yeah, it's almost half, I would imagine.
Yeah. So the Byzantine is the largest one.
Okay. So each individual church is an own entity, an own body. What was your word that you used there?
Autocephalous.
Autocephalous.
Yeah.
But then you could have multiple churches, multiple autocephalous churches who are all worshiping the same way or very similar ways within the Byzantine rite, but they're still freestanding churches.
Correct.
Autocephalous churches.
Yes.
Good. I'm going to use that word as much as I can.
Okay.
Okay. So now that we kind of understand East versus West, the different Eastern churches, you are Ukrainian, part of the Ukrainian church underneath the Byzantine rite. See, we're doing a quick summary here. This is great. But you weren't baptized in the Ukrainian church.
No.
You were baptized in the West, in the Roman church.
Yes.
And you ended up transferring over, officially, I might add.
Yes,
Like,
officially.
This is not just, I prefer going to this church, but I'm still Roman. You are officially a Ukrainian Catholic.
Correct. Yes.
All right. Tell us the story. Walk us through this process. How did this work? Give us the 1,000-foot view,
Yeah,
because I know this story could be its own separate conversation.
it could be very long, but I will try to make it as clear as possible.
Perfect.
So I grew up Roman Catholic my whole life. Honestly, never even heard of the Eastern Catholic churches.
Hence why we're doing this podcast.
Hence why we're doing
most
this
people
podcast.
have not heard
Yeah.
of the Eastern churches.
Yeah, so when I was going to college, I was even discerning priesthood. I was discerning all these things. So I was full blown Roman Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met this girl.
Girls do it to you.
Yeah, they make you do some weird things.
Mm-hmm.
But we were friends for a while, and then we ended up dating, and deciding we wanted to get married.
Mm-hmm.
One problem: she wasn't Catholic.
And what was she?
She was Orthodox, American Orthodox, which comes from the Russian tradition. Okay. So technically, you can just say, just to keep things more clear, Russian Orthodox.
Russian Orthodox in America.
Yes, correct. So we were trying to figure out, how do we figure out this difference? I wanted to stay Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
That was a no option.
Mm-hmm.
I was either not get married or
get married and be Catholic.
Yeah, or stay Catholic. Like, no, not or. Like, just be Catholic.
Yes.
Right. We were trying to figure that out, and so I wanted to stay Catholic. She wanted to keep her traditions of the Orthodox Church because she fell in love with them. Mm-hmm. Understandably, they're beautiful. So we were trying to figure that out, and I forgot how I came upon it, but someone told me about the Eastern Catholic churches. Mm-hmm. So I started.
And was this pretty late in your relationship then? Like, you were already discussing engagement at this point?
We knew each other for a while.
Okay.
So we were pretty confident that we were going to get married. She
She
was more confident earlier on than I was.
I imagine that this is for most Catholics, this is a very early conversation about faith. And so I imagine this had been an ongoing conversation since like day one of your relationship.
Yeah. It definitely was from day one. And I think we started off really just trying to convert each other.
Of course. And we see who won out this conversation.
Yeah. In a way, we both won.
Yes.
It's so we discussed it for a while, and eventually I started coming upon the Eastern Catholic churches. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, learning more about it, trying to decide if this is something I want to do too. Mm-hmm. Because when I was learning about them, I realized there's a lot of differences between the Roman Catholic Church, which I grew up in, and the Eastern Catholic Church.
And you had not been to an Eastern Catholic Church or an Orthodox church or anything like this yet.
The funny thing is, the first time I ever went to an Orthodox church was, my wife's name is Rachel, mm-hmm. Was Rachel's chrismation. So when she became Orthodox, it's the first time I've ever been to the Catholic Church, Orthodox church, and witnessed an Orthodox liturgy. And I had no intentions of dating her then. That changed. So that was my first time there, and I was like, that was actually my first time really understanding that, oh wait, the Orthodox Church exists, number one, because I always heard the name, Greek Orthodox, and I was like, oh, so you're Greek Orthodox? No, I'm Russian Orthodox. So you're Greek Orthodox. It's like, no, then she explained to me there's a bunch of different traditions, the Orthodox Church and all that. But anyway, back to
We digress.
That's the name of the podcast. So eventually I started learning more about the Eastern Catholic churches. I started, at the time I was in Naples. She was in Uganda.
Because she did Benedictine Volunteer Corps.
No. She was teaching at she was teaching classically at a school in Uganda. She taught some Ugandan kids, but mostly she was teaching the missionaries' kids. Okay. So they can do the missionary work while she taught them.
Via the Orthodox Church or via another Christian church?
Another Christian church.
Gotcha.
But there was an Orthodox church nearby, surprisingly, in Uganda.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so she was able to go to church there and develop a smaller community there.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we were discussing this long distance over Zoom for a long time.
With terrible time difference.
Terrible time difference. Yeah. Ugh, terrible. That's another story. Mm-hmm. And I started going in Naples. There was a church an Eastern Catholic church about 40 minutes away.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started going there, and once or twice, I didn't go many times, just to see what it was. And I was like, okay, I can receive communion here.
Mm-hmm.
It's Catholic. Clearly, they pray for the Pope. Like, they mention the Pope. They have pictures of the Pope inside their church. So I was like, okay, it's Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So I was more open to learning about it at that point. And as I learned more about it, I started liking the traditions as well. And then I'm saying like now because I didn't love them yet. And so then I took this as this is a real valid option.
Mm-hmm.
So when she came back, we discussed it more. And she still wasn't comfortable becoming Catholic. I think she needed to see it too, that this was very much Orthodox in union with Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And so as she started seeing it more, she got a little more like, okay, I get it. This actually is Orthodox in union with Rome. I'm not going to lose my traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And we can make this work. So to just make it short, we decided that that's what we're going to do. We decided to become Eastern Catholic. Eventually, after going for 4 years to the Eastern Catholic Church, I learned to love it very much. I love the traditions. I think the disciplines even I've come to love more, even more than the Roman Church. Not to say the Roman Church is less or anything, just that it fits my spirituality very well.
And so ultimately, you changed really rites within the Catholic Church. You went
Correct.
from west to east. She actually really converted
Correct.
from the Orthodox Church to
Which
the
is not
Catholic
a very
Church.
hard thing to do because the Orthodox Church, to put it, some people would disagree with saying this, but we're kind of in an irregular relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say it's irregular. Some people will say it's schism, but like with similarities. Whatever. I'm just gonna say irregular relationship.
Okay.
Because we believe that they have valid sacraments. They have valid apostolic succession.
Mm-hmm.
So everything she did in the Orthodox Church was right, except she's not under the Pope, and some of the teachings are a little different. So when she converted, all she had to do was say the creed. She didn't have to go through the RCIA class or anything.
She just really had to say the creed and recognize the validity of the Pope as the Holy Father.
Correct. Yeah. So that's all she had to do. All she had to do, all she did was go into chapel with our priest, say the creed, and she was Catholic.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what did you have to do? So
Nothing.
From going from west to east.
That's not true at all.
You didn't have to say a creed.
No, I did not.
You already believed everything
I
they
actually
believed.
did.
Oh, you
say the
did?
Creed.
Interesting. Okay.
Which, because the Eastern Catholic churches don't include the filioque in the creed,
Mm-hmm.
even though we don't disagree with theology, we just don't do it because it's not part of our tradition.
Yeah.
But I did actually have to say the creed when I switched rites. But
what was the process for switching?
Yeah.
Let's dive into that a little bit.
process for switching. First thing you have to do is attend the church for at least a year. So you have to make sure like this is something that you want to do. I think now they're even suggesting for it to be longer.
And why is that?
Well,
Maybe not longer, but why would you
Yeah.
think that you need to attend it a year?
Well, one, to make sure that this is something you want to do. This is a tradition that you're going to be part of the rest of your life. Because once you transfer once, you can never transfer again.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you're stuck.
Yeah, I'm stuck. I'm Ukrainian Greek Catholic for the rest of my life.
Good to know.
Yeah. So if it's going to be that type of commitment, you need to make sure that this is something you want to do. Also, you're doing it for the right reasons. They want to make sure, you're not angry with the Roman Catholic Church and therefore becoming Eastern just to bash the Roman Catholic Church. That's not a good reason to become Eastern Catholic. Another reason sometimes is in the Eastern Catholic Church you are allowed to have married priests. So they want to make sure that, men are not just going over there just become married priests because then they're not actually discerning the vocation properly. So yeah, those are just some reasons why they make sure you take your time to make sure that this is something that you want to do before you switch rights.
Cool. So you spent a year in the church, and you're like, yep, this is what I want to do, officially.
Yes.
So how do you go about making it official?
Then you have to write a letter to the bishop of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church.
And who is that, and where is he located?
This is Bishop Bodan. He is located, I want to say it's in Pittsburgh. So
your bishop is in Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
Like our bishop, obviously, is in Charlotte, not very far. The hierarchy of
Right.
your church is in. It's
Right.
quite a far way away.
yes, it's far away. But the funny thing is, and I don't mean this to to diss any Roman bishops, but I see my bishop way more.
Interesting.
Yeah, because there's less churches.
Because he's probably overseeing 24 churches in his.
Yeah,
Is it called diocese in the Eastern Church?
eparchy.
Eparchy.
Yeah, so we're part of the St. Josephat eparchy.
So it's not
Parma.
as many churches, but they're definitely much farther distance apart.
Yes, yeah, they're further apart, less churches.
Mhm.
So it won't be like I don't even know how many churches are in Charlotte.
I think it's 90 parishes plus the missions. You get close to 100.
Yeah, so yeah, he can get around a lot faster with about 25 or however many are in his part of the eparchy.
Mhm.
Which is nice. I do like being able to see our bishop a lot.
Yeah,
so,
that's awesome.
So what was the question again?
So you're writing a letter to the bishop of
I was
the
writing a letter to the
Ukrainian
bishop,
church.
yeah. He then approves it, sends it to the Roman Catholic bishop of whichever diocese I'm in at the time.
So it would be Charlotte, Bishop Peter Jugas.
So Bishop Jugas is the one who approved it for me. And then he sends it back to the Eastern Catholic bishop who recognizes his approval.
Mhm.
And then I get a letter from the bishop saying you have been accepted. And then at that point I have to go say the creed in front of the priest to finalize it.
So Ukraine bishop says, "Yep, we will accept you as long as your bishop approves."
Yep.
Then the Western bishop says, "Yep, you can have him
Yeah.
as long as you still want him."
Yeah.
And then the
Exactly.
Ukraine bishop says, "Cool, we will take him. EJ, we are welcoming you into the church." And
That is
then
correct.
you could say the creed, and you officially are Eastern Catholic.
That's correct.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how long have you been Eastern Catholic now?
About 3 months.
Hey, 3 months, but you had a year of practice and training leading
Yeah.
up to that. So
There's a lot of complications, which I'm not going to go into.
yeah, that's
Them-
another story for another time.
Yeah.
All right. So now that you've been Eastern Catholic officially
Mhm.
for 3 months, let's talk about some of the major differences that we as Westerners would walk into an Eastern church and notice.
Mhm.
All right. So you walk into an Eastern church. What's the biggest thing that you're going to notice that's different for somebody like me?
Yeah. First thing you're going to notice probably is the art.
Mhm.
If you go, you won't notice it in my church because we're in a hall. But if you go to an actual church building of the Eastern Catholic Church, first thing you're going to notice is there's icons everywhere.
Mhm.
All right. They're painted on the walls. They're actually like icon pictures all over the place. And that's part of our theology and our spirituality.
Mhm.
There is a theology behind icons. They're called the windows into heaven. And they're, in a real way, meant to show us that the saints and the angels are present with us during the liturgy. And it gives that physical feel. So it gives us, being human and material, it gives us a material vision into the spiritual world.
Which is same theology in the Western
Mhm.
church. When we are celebrating Mass, we are celebrating Mass with
Correct.
the saints and angels. Heaven meets earth. This is why we have an altar rail. This is why the sanctuary is a holy place, because of what is actually happening during the
Right.
consecration.
Right.
And
This is
same
the way it's
theology.
represented is different. So
Exactly.
we have icons. You have statues.
Mhm.
We both have stained glass windows, depending on the church.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean that's probably the main thing you'll notice. Icons are also a big part of our prayer life. Most Eastern Catholics have an icon corner at home.
Mhm.
So
How many icons do you have in your icon corner?
probably have like 20.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, well I have 2 icon corners, so I'm counting them both.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
And have you noticed I have a little icon corner in my office? Are you proud of the
I
Ukrainian
did.
Catholic?
I am very, very proud of it. Yeah. First thing I noticed when I walked into your
Yeah,
office.
of course. That would be the first thing you would notice.
So yeah, I mean that's one of the differences. We do venerate the icon. There's usually an icon in the front of the church when you walk in. Normally, during ordinary time, it's just Mary and Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout the year, there's different major feast days, or our patron saint of the church, Saint Basil.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have their icon displayed, and we'll venerate that if we walk in to recognize the feast day.
Nice. Do
Do
you still have a holy water font like we do in the Western Church, or in some ways does that kind of replace the holy water font?
No, that does replace the holy water font. I may be misspeaking because again we're in a hall, so I don't get to see this every day.
And you only
But I've never noticed going to an Orthodox church or another Eastern Catholic church having holy water fonts.
And I imagine that's kind of a similar understanding of, Western, we'll walk into the Roman church, dip your fingers in the holy water font, bless ourselves to recognize that, hey, I'm a child of God, I'm walking into a sacred holy place, I've been baptized. Probably a similar kind of understanding.
Right. Yeah, it is a similar understanding. I mean, most people, if they go in there, they don't venerate the icon. Either they're Roman Catholic or they're not Christian, or Catholic. So yeah, that's kind of how you know.
Yep.
But yeah, there's an old tradition that doesn't really occur anymore. But during the liturgy, there's when you switch, and I may be wrong at the timing, but I believe when you switch to the liturgy of the Eucharist, all those who are not Catholic have to leave because they're not worthy but they're not prepared.
They're not as part of the communion.
Right. They're not prepared to receive it. That doesn't happen anymore, but that was a tradition back then.
Actually, and I mean, in the Western Church, it was tradition, and it still is. It could still be part of the rite of RCIA, right? Those who are converting, leave when you get to the Eucharistic liturgy.
Right.
So anytime we do a rite of RCIA, there's a part where there's multiple options, and Father can basically say, since you're not worthy to participate in the communion at this point, go and continue to learn the faith, essentially.
Right.
Or he could say, but stay with us and participate even though you cannot receive communion. So there's still hints of that even in the Western Church.
Right, yeah. So that was just brainstorming about an idea that, maybe there's something about the blessing yourself, recognizing your baptism.
Yep. That would make sense.
But
so what other big things are we going to notice?
Yeah.
Would a Westerner notice?
We have an iconostasis,
okay,
which kind of goes off the icons, but it's a wall. When you walk into the church, it separates the altar and the clergy from the people. We call it the Holy of Holies. At the point of consecration, the Father will say, "Leave holy things for the holy," because that is to help us remember that is our goal, right? Heaven is on the other side, and we are trying to go there. So every time the priest comes out of the wall, because it has two doors, right? Every time he comes out of the doors, he's representing Christ, trying to bring us back in, right? So it's just constant symbolism throughout the whole thing. But it's also meant to show us, they're hiding something sacred, right? In the Catholic Church, both East and West, we have a tradition of veiling that which is sacred. So whenever you see the chalice, it's covered, right? You don't see it until it's time to actually receive it. And it's meant to show that this is a sacred symbol. We believe we're very big on mysteries. Even the sacraments, we call them mysteries. We don't even call them sacraments. Traditionally, sometimes we call them sacraments, but traditionally we call them mysteries. So we're very much into the mystical theology there. So the iconostasis covers the altar. It distinguishes that only the priest is allowed through the doors, right? Everyone else has to go around. So if the deacon is serving, he cannot go through the doors. They're called the royal doors because only Christ is worthy of going through the doors.
And those in persona Christi.
Correct. Those in persona Christi.
In the person of Christ. Sorry for those who don't know what that Latin phrase means.
Right.
When you're received into ordination as the priesthood, you are in persona Christi, acting in the person of Christ.
Right.
And so there's a very close relationship between the priest and Christ.
Right. So only the priest can go through the doors. Deacons, all the servers have to go around. But yeah, I mean, you'll see that in pretty much every Eastern Catholic church, as long as it is developed. Most missions probably won't have one if you go to a mission church.
Because I know, I think you mentioned to me at one point that you helped build.
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
So what does yours actually look like since you're in a parish hall, essentially?
It's 2 wooden panels with a little archway over it, and has 2 doors. So essentially, it'll be much longer and have deacon doors on the side so deacons can go through the side.
And then the servers are still walking all the way around.
I actually think the servers can go through the deacon doors.
Okay.
Yeah. Deacon goes first, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, those are the 2 probably differences. Another difference is if you're in a more traditional Eastern Catholic church, there's no pews. You stand the whole time.
Stand. Do you take off your shoes?
My wife probably would. I don't. But yes, you're supposed to. It's holy ground. So that's the understanding of it. It's that you do take off your shoes because you're on holy ground.
Because in high school, we had a professor who was Byzantine Catholic, Ukrainian Catholic, and so he brought in his priest at least once a year to celebrate the Eastern liturgy for us. And I mean, they said all students, when you're walking into the chapel now changed into a Eastern church, take off your shoes as you enter. And we sat on the floor during the homily.
Yeah, we sat on the floor during the homily sometimes. We'd have chairs around, so if there's open seat, run to it. But those are we're supposed to sit on the floor. Those are really just for people who can't stand, pregnant, older people. So, in the Eastern tradition is that standing is more reverent. So that's tradition. We're in the West, kneeling, sitting, more contemplative positions are more reverent.
Yeah, because in the East, you guys don't kneel during the liturgy at all.
No, the only time we kneel is we'll have kneeling vespers, but during Lent we do a lot of prostrations, which are full prostrations. We go all the way down. I hit my head one time. I don't know if I should have said that here, but it was a little embarrassing.
You know what? You're in a safe space.
Yeah, thanks, man. So that's the only time we do kneel is during Lent. We do the prostrations, but it's up and down. It's not like we stand there for a while.
And same thing with genuflecting, right? We do genuflecting in the Western Church. One knee, sign of the cross. You guys aren't genuflecting.
No, we don't genuflect. We do the sign of the cross 3 times and bow. Sometimes we go all the way to the ground. That's more of our genuflecting. So we'll do it 3 times. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, all the way down.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the 2 different traditions. It's just more Eastern reverence versus Western reverence.
Cool. So 2 other things I want to talk about, because these are things that I think people of a Western parish would notice now that you are Eastern and you come back to the Western Church for Mass.
Yeah.
2 big things. 1, sign of the cross. You guys kind of make it backwards. But maybe we make it backwards compared to the more ancient tradition.
Technically, you make it backwards.
All right. So tell me why there's a distinction between you going one way and we going the other way.
Yeah. So I mean, from what I know of history, the early church always did it right to left. So we went Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right to left. At some point, when I think it was after the schism, West wanted to differentiate themselves from the East, so they changed it from left to right. But I mean, there's always symbolism and reasons behind it. In the East, we go right to left. One of the reasons, and this is the only reason I know, but I know there's another reason. I just can't remember what it is.
That's all right. You've only been Eastern for
exactly
3 months.
I gotta pass here.
Yeah.
We go Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right to left to remember that we want to be like the thief on the cross, who repented in front of the Lord and was brought into heaven. So we want to be that person who repents, even at the most difficult times of our lives. And then we hold our fingers like this, one to symbolize the 2 natures of Jesus, the human and divine nature, and then the Trinity. So that's how we hold our hands.
And you actually see Jesus holding his hand a lot like that in icons and things like that.
Like this.
Oh, he goes like, okay.
Yeah.
Why does Jesus go like that then?
I think it's the inverse of what we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because he is God.
Yeah.
So,
that makes sense.
yeah. We're trying to reflect him. He is. So
whether it's true or not, it's making sense. So keep going. You're doing great.
I'm honestly making this up. No. I might be making it up.
Please correct us in the comments below if
Yes.
EJ's wrong.
Fact check me, please. Then so the West, you guys normally have open hands, which represents the 5 wounds of Christ, and you go left to right to symbolize despair into glory. So those are the 2 differences you'll see as far as the sign of the cross.
Cool. All right, now the other big one that I know you've actually people have mentioned or asked you about when you've come to Sacred Heart with your family.
Yes,
is that your daughters, who are, what are their ages?
I have a little over a 1.5-year-old and a 5-month-old.
So the 1.5 and 5-month-old are both receiving communion.
Correct.
Whether they're at the Eastern Church or the Western Church, if they go to a Catholic church, the priest will be giving them
Canon law says they have to
giving them communion.
So in the Eastern Church, infants receive all 3 initiation sacraments at once.
So baptism, first communion, confirmation at baptism. What
At baptism.
we would say at baptism.
Right. At baptism. So you get baptized, then right after you get confirmed, and then you receive the Eucharist during the liturgy. I guess the practical things people always think about is like, how does a baby have the Eucharist?
Yeah, because we in the Western Church are thinking, okay, there's like this little wafer cracker.
Yeah,
that's
right.
pretty big for somebody to receive, for especially an infant to receive.
Right.
So tell us how that works practically within the Eastern Church.
Yeah, so in the Eastern Church, the way we receive the Eucharist is actually on a spoon. So the priest will come out with a chalice, and we have leavened bread.
So bread with yeast.
Bread with the yeast, so it's risen. It represents the rising Christ, which we can go into later on a different podcast, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
But just to stay on topic with the infant receiving communion, the priest will have the Eucharist, the body inside the blood. He'll come out and distribute it. Normally, he'll distribute the body. He'll get a piece of the body with the blood and give it to the adults. For the infants, he just puts the blood on and puts it on their lip. Sometimes they open their mouth, sometimes they don't. But they'll just lick it off their lips, and that's it.
So now here's the big question. If everyone's eating off of this spoon, isn't that spoon kind of dirty? But what about hygiene, man?
It's Jesus, man.
I don't know. I mean, COVID, we get rid of chalices all the time here in the Western Church.
So during COVID, some churches will have plastic spoons and dispose of them right after.
But but you're not actually like biting over the spoon, right?
No. Children probably are. But
great.
No, we normally go arms crossed in the East means you are receiving.
Which is weird because arms crossed in the West is the universal sign of I am not prepared to receive.
Correct. Yeah. We just go up, we open our mouths, stick our head back, and the priest drops it in our mouth.
Yeah, so it's more of a little dump, if you will.
Yeah. And then they'll clean the spoon right after with the purificator.
And in the Western Church, we have the servers hold a little paten, right? It's a little gold plate on a little handle just to catch the Eucharist if it should fall.
Right.
You all have a similar idea, because if you're receiving the precious blood on a spoon, there's going to be drippage eventually. That's just practicality.
Right. So we actually have someone holding the purificator right underneath their chins as we receive the Eucharist.
Yeah. I know when I served the Eastern Rite liturgy at high school, there was a big cloth that we would like open and close.
Yeah.
So almost like, maybe a bad analogy, but like a runway. It's a spoon to go over just in case anything drips. You've got a big purificator cloth that's going to catch anything.
Yeah. And I mean, Father Matlack, Deacon Matthew Haynes are very good at getting into our mouths. So, so no worry there. But kids will bite the spoon. But I'm not too worried about it. I do believe that, receiving Jesus doesn't.
There's something to it.
There's something to it. Yeah.
No, totally agree. Totally agree. All right. So before we wrap up, let's say I want to experience this. Let's say I, a Western Catholic, would like to go to the Eastern Catholic Church, would experience this. First of all, am I welcome? Am I allowed to show up?
Absolutely not you. Everyone else is.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. But there's a Eastern Catholic Church not too far from us where you attend. So give us a little bit of the logistics of, all right, if a viewer at home wanted to attend with you all, how would they go about that?
Yeah. So first thing I'll mention is attending an Eastern Catholic Church does fulfill Sunday obligation. So
it is still Mass.
Yes, it is still Mass. You're still going to church. You're still listening to the Word of God. You're still receiving the Eucharist.
Yeah, receiving Eucharist.
Or at least have the ability to receive the Eucharist, right? So there's no worry about that. So if you want to come on a Sunday, feel free. You don't have to go to another Mass and try to double up on that day. Perfectly fine. We have liturgies every Sunday at 11 a.m. At St. Thomas Aquinas Church in Charlotte. It's right across from UNCC Charlotte.
But as we've been saying, you're not actually in the church.
We're correct.
You're in Aquinas Hall.
Yes, we're in Aquinas Hall. So if you're going into the church, it's right across from the church.
So stand at the doors of the church, look into the St. Thomas Aquinas, turn around 180, and then walk.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So we're there every Sunday. If you don't want to give up a Sunday, we also have Vespers every Saturday evening at 5 p.m.
And Vespers counts as at least a Sunday obligation in the Eastern Church.
Not the West.
Does not count as the West.
Yeah, so don't try to get out of that one. Yeah, it's only for me. I'm allowed to do that.
But we can still attend.
But it's strongly discouraged.
We would still have to go to an obligation, a Mass the next day.
Correct. Yeah, you can still go to both. Yeah. But yeah, for me, it's strongly encouraged that we go to both. Just because we get the full liturgy. It's not just Mass on Sunday for us. It's a whole liturgical tradition.
So you're at Vespers basically every Saturday?
No, I'm not. I should be.
Okay. Sorry to call you out there.
No, it's fine. I thank you for calling me out. I need to. But yeah.
Cool. And if you don't want everyone to know that you're a Western, make sure you venerate their icon as you walk in.
Exactly. And cross yourself the opposite way.
Go backwards, kick off your shoes if people are kicking off their shoes. Doesn't sound like that happens.
I think only my wife does, or my daughter. You know.
Oh, I want to be in the group with your wife and your daughter and kick up. No, I don't. Cool. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today about the Eastern Catholic Church. I know, as we've kind of hinted at, we will do more to our Eastern Catholic series. And since you are the resident Eastern Catholic here at Sacred Heart and very close to PowerPod Studios, I'm sure we'll be chatting more.
Yes.
So
sounds good.
Thanks so much for chatting with me today. And thank you all for viewing. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so we can start this channel that is going to literally have one video once I upload this one. And we will go from there. So thank you so much, and hope you all have a blessed day. Thanks, EJ.
No problem. Thanks.